rebuilding. The catastrophic failure, a new start, physically, mentally, our careers, our businesses. Step back, first step, next step. The driver in me just wants to get it done tomorrow. We'll do this, do that, let's move this, where are we at with this? You build some confidence, build some self-esteem, start to feel better about yourself. The Silverback Blueprint Podcast, a show for men over 40. We focus on getting stronger, staying motivated, building discipline, creating a community, and becoming truly happy. Hey guys, and welcome to episode 73 of the Silverback Blueprint Podcast. Why the tough decisions are always the right ones. You know, more often than not, guys, when we get into a situation that has to be dealt with, tough or difficult or just high pressure, we know what the right decision is. You know, we call it our gut feeling, our instinct or whatever. But 9 times out of 10, we know exactly how we should handle the situation, but we don't. And there's, I think there's some pretty good reasons why. And I think in recognizing those reasons, it's the continuation of, improving ourselves and making ourselves better to better equipped to handle these situations and to deal with these things, right? I think that what happens is when we're in the middle of a situation, that we have to deal with, and sometimes it's imminent. I mean, where it's fight or flight, we got to deal with it, that kind of thing. Sometimes it's an argument that comes up. Sometimes it's a situation at work or at business, at home that has to be dealt with. So not necessarily dealt with right away. Not everything is reactionary, nor should it be. I mean, it does happen. But, again, when we talked about earlier about, getting rid of things that aren't necessary to be in our life or have to be dealt with, the consequence of that too, though, is that the things that are important to us, that should be important to us, that do matter and need to matter, they have to be dealt with as well. And decisions have to be made on situations that arise in those areas of our relationships with our family and loved ones, in our careers, in our personal health, and those kind of things. And a lot of times, some of those decisions are tough. They're tough because the consequence of those decisions can be hard to deal with, or it could be a lot more work. I think that's one of the things. Sometimes we get a little complacent, where we just don't feel like having to do some heavy lifting. But I think what happens is I think we let things get in the way or filter our responses on what they should be. And I'm talking about things like fear and anger, excitement, obsession, most often, these are the things that get in the way. These are things that hold us back from making that right decision, from having that tough conversation, from sending that email or making that phone call or having that face-to-face that has to happen. One of the things for us, or for me personally, is, as Hostile itself is growing, the brand is growing, the business is growing, and I'm talking about the gym, I'm talking about the gear, the stuff, different opportunities that are coming along, and especially moving towards what my vision is for the company and for myself. Some tough decisions have to happen. And sometimes those decisions aren't, about, it's not about ending something, but it's about adjusting something. It's about saying, hey, listen, I know we've been doing this a certain way, but we have to change some things. What got us here isn't necessarily going to be what's going to get us to the next level. So some changes have to happen. And change is never easy, right? And if you're dealing with humans, right, then you have to deal with the human condition and the human factor of things. So just much like fear and all those emotions get in the way of us making those decisions, sometimes the person we have to deal with, they have to deal with those emotions as well too. Right? So we're part of us are worried how they're going to take it. How are they going to react to it? Right? It's meant to be, the decision is meant to have this happen, but you never know how someone else is going to react and stuff. And I think what happens, and I know this happens for me is personally, and it's part of it is just, my alcoholic brain or whatever you call it, is that I'll run all kinds of scenarios in my head as to, well, this could happen, if this happens and this happens, and if this person says this, and I'm going to fucking say this, and if they do this, and I'm going to do that, and always ends up with a fucking beating in the snow, right? And, 9 times out of 10, it's simply just, Luke's laughing here, it's simply just, like I said earlier, dealing with the fucking phone bill that was bugging me and stuff like that, right? There was no beating in the snow, right? But my mind sometimes just goes off that way, right? And that's the thing. That's where I'm letting these things get in the way that aren't even there. The acronym for fear is false evidence appearing real. I like that one a lot. Or sometimes it's our obsession. Listen, it's 2 a.m. We've watched 5 episodes of fucking Netflix. Do we really need to watch the 6th? But we want that immediate gratification, right? We want to just go to the next level. And in our minds, we fucking know this isn't the right decision. We know we're going to be a bag of shit the next morning. We know we have things we have to get done the next day, right? So why do that, right? That's part of part of dealing with our obsessions, part of our, wanting more and that kind of thing, the immediate gratification. It's a very real thing for some more than others, right? But that's the big thing, right? And a lot of times when we run these scenarios and we do these things and we fill our head with all these possibilities, 99% of them never happen. They really, really don't. Right? But we waste that energy and that focus and we create this drama inside where how it ends up going when you finally make those decisions, have those conversations, it rarely goes to that level. And if it goes to that level, I think it's because we waited way too long and it became a bigger thing than it needed to be overall. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes we sit there and we know we should have been dealing with this situation for weeks and months, maybe even years. And the fact that we let it go longer and longer and longer made it a bigger thing for us inside our minds, but also for the situation or the individuals involved that have to be dealt with and stuff like that, right? And not everything means that it's going to be horrible. Sometimes we get caught up in little things that, it's like tearing the fucking Band-Aid off. Just tear it off. Sitting there and trying to pull it off slowly because you're afraid of the pain, I think it actually makes it worse. Right? It doesn't mean it's easy though. And I think that's the other aspect that we have to look at, right? Is that some tough decisions aren't easy, right? If we're dealing with a budget and we know we have to make cuts and we know the cuts are for the good of the company, the household, whatever it is that's being dealt with, we know it's for the long-term health and prosperity of what you're doing, right? We have to honestly look at that and believe in that. When we make that short-term decision that might be a little uncomfortable, might have a little bit of pain associated for it and stuff like that, rather than prolong until it becomes a big fucking thing that fucks everything up. How many times have you guys done that? Have you seen it? You've handled a situation that you waited way too long, and when you finally dealt with it, it was much worse than it had been. And maybe it's much worse because you were so pissed off about it for so long, you overreacted. Or the other side overreacted. Or the situation had become so dire that it became a big fucking thing. My favorite thing is, when you look at your credit cards, now they have to, by law, they have this thing in the world's smallest print. I don't even know how they fucking do it. It's the world's smallest print, and it says, if based on the balance you have in your credit card, if you pay only the minimum balance, it'll take like 18.2 years to pay off that balance. Right? And that's really kind of a cool way to look at it and stuff like that. So let's say you owe $2,500 on a credit card, right? And it's maxed out. I don't know what your credit limit is on a credit card. I'm sure some people listening have $100,000 on a credit card. But let's use $2,500. The minimum payment is $112. Again, I'm just making numbers up, right? Look at that fine print, and it'll say something ridiculous like 21.2 years to pay off this balance. 21 years of digging, and all you're doing is giving all this interest, all this energy to somebody else. Turn around and just find $500 a month and pay that fucker off in 5.5 months. Right? Tough decision, some short-term pain or discomfort, but in the long term, so much better for you. Do you know what I mean? If you're paying $100 a month, just a minimum payment, that's $1,200 a year, right? For 25 years or 24 years or 20 years even, that's crazy money on a $2,500 debt, right? It's the same thing with some of the tough things we have to deal with. Maybe we have to have that tough conversation with a significant other. Maybe we have to have that tough conversation with the neighbor or someone we work with and stuff. But I think it's better to have that, bring things to a point. But if you can do it in a way where you're in control of your emotions and you try to be more calm and you try to be respectful to yourself and to this situation or the individual, what happens is it doesn't escalate. And if it does, and you really handled it as best you could and as mature as you could and stuff like that, then that's something that's beyond your control, right? And then at the end of the day, it still comes to a point and it can be dealt with. And in a few weeks or a few months, right, it's gone. And sometimes it's immediate. I've had to have a couple of tough conversations around Christmas time with some individuals I deal with, some people that work for me and stuff like that. And tough because no one's doing anything wrong. It's just we're making some changes in the company. And I'm worried about how that's going to go over. I don't want people to take it the wrong way. I know it affects people. It affects me. So some of these conversations, could have been done maybe a little earlier. However, because I know where I'm at now and what I'm trying to do, and I'm always looking at the big picture, I'm having these conversations a lot sooner. And I'm going into them more prepared. And part of what I do is I really try to go in and really mentally, mindset, make myself calmer, make myself better prepared to deal with it and stuff. And it makes such a difference. It really, really does. Right? Some of these things need a face-to-face because they warrant it, because the situation is that important or that person is that important. Sometimes it's just a matter of sending an email because that situation warrants it. That's enough of a level of communication based on that situation, right? Sometimes it's a phone call. I personally hate phone calls. I don't like being on the phone ever. Never have. I don't know why. So I try to avoid it, and just because it's not one of my favorite forms of communication. It really isn't, right? So I try to do it otherwise. I'd rather set up a little meeting or send an email. Sometimes I'll send an email knowing that it's going to create the meeting, if you know what I mean, right? So that sometimes I send an email not to resolve the whole situation, but I do it to start the next level of the conversation overall. There's times where sometimes I just have to put my foot down because I feel like I'm getting pushed around. I had that happen recently with a supplier. And you know what? I was looking at things and I was trying to be, and maybe that's a little bit where I'm swung a little bit too much to the other side, where I'm trying to be calm and cool and, understanding and think about both sides. But at one point, I just had this gut feeling tell me that enough is enough. And then when this one person reached out, I basically told them enough is enough. But at that point, I'd resolved that if it doesn't work out any further, it doesn't go any further, I'm okay with it. You know what? It had the exact opposite. I finally put my foot down, said what I had to say. What a world of difference in this in the relationship all of a sudden. But I also know, my gut tells me that dealing with this person going forward, I'm going to have to do that on a regular basis. I'm going to have to be firmer and stand my ground even more. And that's okay. And there's a point where I'm going to decide, do I keep continuing? Is that worth doing this business and having to approach it that way? Or do I move on? Or is it worth it? And that's just the way I have to deal with it with this individual and this company. And either one's okay. It's just, again, I got to listen to my gut. And when it tells me to do something, figure out what it is I have to do. But again, not react. That's my big thing. I think going forward in 2018, my whole thing is don't react. And when I say don't react, I mean don't react right away on the spot. No knee-jerk reaction, right? No quick snap. Take it in, process, and then come up. Now maybe it's an immediate conversation, but not a snap, not an explosion. Maybe it's, hey, you know what? This is something I got to deal with. Sit down with it, think about it, plan my thoughts. What is it I'm looking to get out of this? And then follow up with a conversation, right? And I think that's the one thing that I think if I can do more of that going forward, I think it's going to take me to another level. It's going to take me to another level internally. I'm going to feel better about things. It's going to reduce my stress level. We talked about this earlier in other episodes that we need stress. Stress is what propels us. But we need to control how much stress, what kind of stress, and how we react to that stress, right? I think that's super important. So again, for me, it's a lot of internal stuff. It's a lot of how do I handle the situation? How do I make myself better so that I can do better in a situation? How can I be more organized to avoid some of these situations? Because sometimes that's what it is too, guys. We're not organized, right? We haven't set ourselves up to deal with something properly, and it's coming up over and over again, and we haven't sat down and really organized. How do we really feel about this situation? What's really important to us in this situation? And then once we know that, when we go to have that discussion, we go to have that decision that at first was going to be tough, we realize that it's not that tough. It just required a little more legwork on our part. And then we're going to get better at it. We're going to get better at it. We're going to be more comfortable doing it. Because the first couple of times we do something that's different, we're going to be anxious. Oh, am I overreacting? Am I underreacting? I normally don't say anything in this situation. So now we're into new territory. Well, that's scary. That's uncomfortable. But that's where we should be, right? We need to put ourselves out there, right? We need to, we often say things like, if your goals don't scare you, then they're not big enough. I think that's important. I think that's true. But they also have to be realistic, and they also have to be within your, knowing what your talent is and what your resources are. And yes, let's push ourselves and let's put ourselves a little bit out there beyond what we would normally do comfortably, right? But don't set yourself up. It's like me at 350 pounds saying, you know what? I'm running a marathon in March, right? And we're January right now. Well, that's putting myself way out there. But that's pretty far unrealistic. Do you know what I mean? So, that to me is where we have to sometimes have a little bit of common sense with if your goals don't scare you, they're not big enough, right? But know that, though, when you go further and you keep moving up and you keep going to the next level that you want to create, there are going to be a lot more times where tough decisions have to be made, right? And 9 times out of 10, they're going to be the right ones. But let's get better at how we do it. Let's get better at the skill of tough discussions and tough decisions and being able to make them. Let's master that. Let's improve our skill set at doing that. Because the first time we do it, it's going to be hard. We're going to be nervous. We're not going to sleep for a couple nights or weeks or whatever it is. But then after we get better at it, we're going to be like, oh, I got to have this conversation. I'm going to set up a meeting, and you know what? Yeah, I'm going to have to deal with it. And it's still going to be uncomfortable, but we're going to be better because we're going to be confident. We're going to know we're better at dealing with it. But do it in a way, guys, that you are good about it. Does that make sense? Don't be a douchebag. Don't become an asshole. If you are a douchebag or an asshole, bring that back, right? Because no one deserves that either. The world doesn't deserve that, that kind of thing. Let's truly do it in a way that we're better at it, but that we always walk away, and the other side can walk away saying, hey, that was a tough conversation, but I really appreciated the way that person handled it with me. If they've got their shit together. If they don't have their shit together, they're never going to appreciate it. And it doesn't matter because it's really about ourselves, how we think, respect, our self-respect for ourselves. As always, guys, work hard, motherfuckers. Head on over to iTunes, leave us a 5-star review. Head over to Hostile Gear. Use the code Silverback to save 20%. And in fact, we've got the Work Hard Motherfucker banner is up now. They're actually selling quite well. People are really pumped about having them. I've seen a few guys send me pictures that they have them inside their home gyms or garage gyms. So that's pretty cool overall. And a lot of guys have said that, it's just they really like what it means, right? It's sort of a no holds barred, you're the one responsible for your success. So you got to do the work. That's all I got for now, guys. I'll talk to you guys later.